everyone, and welcome to Recovery Mode, understanding your customer's new path through the sales funnel. We're glad that everybody could join us here today. I still have a couple people signing on, and good to see everybody as they're joining us today. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Amanda Sett with Rock, Paper, Scissors, and I'm the creative director and CEO here. And we are a branding and marketing firm that work with our clients to help them align their message and brand with their team, their community, and their audience. So they're speaking from one voice to achieve their vision and purpose. So we've been doing this for over 30 years. We've seen a lot of change and done a lot of changing ourselves. And so we're just ready to keep changing as the world is changing around us. Joining us today, though, as well, is our senior content marketer, Valerie Kinney.
Good morning, everyone. So before we dive into today's topic, just a little bit of housekeeping to give you guys a heads up that this is not just a presentation, it's a conversation. So we want you guys to talk with us. So feel free to post any questions or comments in the chat box during the presentation, and then we'll go over them in the Q&A at the end. And if you're listening to this after our live broadcast, please still ask away. We will follow up with you on any questions or comments posted.
Absolutely. All right, so I want to start with this quote. Sales is not about selling anymore, but about building trust and educating. And so this is a big shift, and we want to make sure we're continuing to nurture this. And we'll dive a little bit deeper today on why this shift has happened and what's kind of the replacing old strategies and efforts. But a lot of this is just from the digital world, is we have better data than we ever have before. And because of that, we can segment, and we don't have to do the stand on the corner with a megaphone and whoever hears us hope that we convert some of them. And so that's a lot of what this is shifting away from that megaphone marketing and really connecting with a core audience that you have so that you can build relationships and you are building trust. And so that's the core of what we want to make sure we're shifting into. And we're going to use our sales funnel today to talk a little bit more about what that means.
So what is the sales funnel? This is something you need to understand before you really even start making decisions about your marketing channels and the messages you're going to send out. So we're going to take a minute to explain what this is and how it relates to your audience's journey to becoming a customer.
So we still call it a sales funnel. It's becoming less of a funnel and becoming more of a pipe as we become more and more specific with our audience. But we're going to still use that because it does a really good job of illustrating the journey every person goes through when they make a purchasing decision, or actually just any decision in their life. The reason this funnel is so important because it illustrates how you need to show up for your audience during the entire decision-making process and outlines the different type of information they'll need as they go through each stage. It also allows you to build trust with them on their journey by sharing your expertise and other relevant information from your customer that helps build your credibility in your audience's eyes. So each stage of the funnel is a milestone in the decision-making process. And there's a lot of different theories on, some have like 6 or 7 stages. We like 4. It's easy to wrap your head around, and it's a very clear, distinct stage that each person's in. So first stage is awareness, and this is, I might need something. This could be just being aware of your brand, or like a great example is, 5-10 years ago, I'm not sure the exact timeline, people didn't even know that they could do a ride sharing service like Uber. It wasn't even something that was on their radar. So part of that was like Uber's job was to figure out how to make sure people even knew this was a thing that they could use. So they had to do a bunch of awareness. The second stage is interest. Okay, that's something out there. Oh, you know what? Maybe I could use this, and maybe I need a little bit more information to see if this is something relevant for me. The third stage is decision, and that's reviewing. So, okay, yes, I think this is something I need, and starting to compare to the competitor. And the last one is action, and can we make a deal? So we want to run through a very specific model to help sink this in a little more.
So like Amanda said, that first stage of this funnel is the awareness stage. And so people are becoming more conscious of a service or brand. And a lot of times they might not even know that this problem or need exists and needs to be resolved because they're absorbing so much information. So let's think about some recent scenarios that might have come up. We've had a lot of students learning from home lately. So maybe these high school or college kids, they're semester got disrupted, and they're doing school at home while their parents are working from home, and they need energy to finish up those finals. So they see their parents drinking coffee throughout the day to give them that needed pick me up, and he or she might think, maybe I need coffee too.
So once they've decided, oh yeah, because we've all been teenagers and watched our parents have coffee, and then it's that, okay, maybe I'm old enough, or maybe this isn't as gross as I thought it was. That there's other flavors out there that I need to see if this is a solution that works for me. And so then you get the spectrum of, do you want your coffee nice and black like your mom drank it, or very sugary and sweet like an older sister who always picks up Starbucks?
All right, so now we're at the decision phase, and this is where they're getting closer to converting into a customer, and they're comparing their options. So they're looking at Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and the coffee or the coffee bar at the gas station. They're comparing all these options, the different flavors and price points and that kind of stuff to see what's going to best fit their needs and budget. So as we're thinking about them, this student, they're looking at the money that they have and how can they spread that out throughout the week and how frequently they can make their coffee purchase.
Mm-hmm. Mom's coffee might look really good because it's free.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's that final stage of the decision. So it's taking all of that and then deciding, all right, I have $10 I could spend a week on coffee. I'll go to Quick Trip 3 days a week. I'll go get a Starbucks on Friday, and anything in between. That's good old mom's percolator. Looks very appetizing because I can afford it, and maybe mom will buy me cream and sugar or whatever that is. But that helping you understand what that process is. And we do that every time we make a decision. This is not just your consumer. This is you, and you do it on a very frequent process. So one other thing I want to make sure I touch on now, and we'll talk a little bit later, is re-engagement. And it applies specifically to audience members that have purchased from you before and may consider your product or service or solution again. They usually take the same journey before, but the process is usually a little faster. They don't always have to go all the way up to awareness unless you're introducing a new product. But they already trust you, so that speeds it up as well. So that's just something to consider as we'll get a little bit deeper into that loop in it. So now that you know how your audience members are making decisions, you need to know your marketing efforts and how and where they can show up with the information they need to make the best choices for their needs, budgets, to become that loyal customer. So you're thinking about it, it's important to remember that there are two main goals when we're looking at marketing your business. The first one is you're either converting your audience. You want to be able to get sales and you want to sign them up as customers, deliver your product or service, and move on. But one of the challenges we've experienced in COVID is sometimes you haven't been able to convert for a little bit. Your doors are shut or whatever that looks like, but that doesn't mean you can't stop marketing. The second goal is to grow your audience. And that's really to be able to nurture them so that they're ready to convert when your doors open again, or even might even have a seasonal business where you want to nurture them in between. So there's a lot of different reasons that you might not be able to convert all the time, but there's no reason that you can't be nurturing and growing your audience.
Now, one thing we want to remind you guys about is that while you might have been taught sales is a numbers game, it's not just a numbers game. This is a theory that's kind of been preached to people for years, and that in order to get the customers and get those conversions and to be successful, you've got to make as many connections as possible and just stuff your pipeline with as many prospects and people that you meet as possible. And then that will give you a certain number of conversions. And while it can be helpful to build up your pipeline, the most important thing to remember is that, number one, not everyone that you meet will be a prospect or become a customer. Sales is just as much, if not more, about the approach you take and building those relationships with your target audiences than it is about specific numbers in the pipeline and how many conversions you can make happen out of that.
So what we really want to start to set up is this little shift. So if you're viewing sales as a numbers game, you're following what's referred to as a hunting approach. And when you're hunting for leads, it's a lot like someone who goes hunting daily to provide food for their family. Some days they're successful and other days yield no results. So there's pressure daily for the business to take care of that with that hunting approach. And it's much the same, relying on cold calls, spending lots of money and time and energy on efforts that might bring them closer to a sale to people who are in their target market. So now we want to think more about marketing as being a farmer who plants seeds and wait for them to grow until they're ready to harvest. So during this time, the farmer might water the seeds or provide nurturing until the time is right for harvesting. When you approach marketing from this same standpoint, you're putting your message out into the world in a way that will help you connect with your audience members who are interested in what you do, rather than just sending a message with an attempt to make an immediate sale. So as interest builds and people reach out to you, you collect their contact information and follow up and provide materials or resources that will build value for them and trust as you go along this journey through this process with them. Because going back to that funnel, there's different stages that they're at. And so that helps you nurture that relationship, and the sales will come from that. And this is really getting into quality over quantity. That's the flip we're seeing. So I'm going to go back to that sales funnel. I want to look at it, and I want to start mapping your marketing plan against this. So starting to think about, okay, great, my customer goes through this journey. How do I even turn that into something tangible for action plan? So I want to walk you through what this looks like. So we're talking about awareness. We're really starting to look at the first one, which is so just to reach your leads. There's a lot of different ways you could do this. This could be, if we ever go to trade shows again, that's a great way to do it. It could be through social media, but this would be the first time that they'd be experiencing you. And once you encounter them, you want to be able to capture that lead. A lot of times this could be gated content, exchanging business cards, whatever that is, just so that you then can start to build a relationship with them. And this is where we want to start thinking about the scalability of the digital world, where you're not having to have a very in-depth relationship with every person you meet, but how can you automate some of this? And that's where we get into that nurturing the lead and that decision step. So you're able, as they start to qualify themselves, work them through that process and give them the information that they need once you kind of discover where they are in that process. And then helps you convert them as you go through. So I alluded to a little bit earlier that there is another step, and that is re-engagement. So once somebody is a lead, you want to be able to get them back into that cycle and a repeat customer, because one thing we do know, it has not changed, is that it is cheaper to keep a customer than to get a new one. And so what does that really look like? And that can be delivering world-class customer service and that experience. So customer service is a big part of getting that person back in. Referrals, and being very direct about saying, hey, if you liked our work, please refer us to other people. Remind people that referrals are important to you and a huge compliment to you. And part of that is also just increasing the lifetime value of a customer with that process. If you already have that customer, are there other little add-ons that aren't too big of an investment for your company to be able to increase that ticket item? So for instance, think about the candy bars at a checkout lane. Grocery store's not making a ton of money on it, but every time, if a couple people buy that over the course of a year, that really starts to increase the revenue and that ticket and that loyalty, because it was something that we might not eat candy, but it might have been they decided that's what really would make their day with that.
All right. So one thing that we definitely think is worth mentioning here as you're starting to kind of think about your plan is that there has definitely been a shift that's taken place in what is considered sales versus marketing over the past 15 years or so, and how that can affect the way you approach your marketing strategies and channels, and what that impact looks like. So we want to go back to our funnel for a minute, but show you kind of the side by side of where things used to line up and where they line up now. So in the past, awareness and sometimes the interest stages of the funnel were covered by marketing actions, and all the other stages fell under the sales portion of the funnel. So this meant that as a seller or a provider, you had more contact with the decision process and could adjust to meet a prospect where they were. But now what we're seeing is most of the time, the majority of the funnel is being covered by marketing, which means you may not actually encounter a prospect until they're ready to make the decision to buy. So that's what we've seen in more recent years, is that marketing extends beyond interest and it goes all the way through decision. So you're not necessarily encountering that potential customer in person until they're like, hey, I have a need and you can meet it, I want to buy.
So that really has changed your game, and it also really needs to shift how you're thinking about marketing. So from that being said, it's really important to think about what is it like when we're in that place. And so this is from E-Myth, and they say people make their purchasing decisions with the unconscious mind from the emotional motivation. They care unconsciously about the products and service, how it makes them feel. And it's all about that. It's that feeling side of it, once again. So we need to make sure when we're talking about that funnel, what emotions are we taking into consideration going through that process? So we're not going to get super deep into that today, but just reminding you that if you're not going to encounter that lead until the end of the process, you can't just be so focused on the facts and figures. You really need to understand that audience's core motivation, which is a little bit of a setup to next month's webinar, which we'll talk about in a minute.
All right, so now you've got this knowledge with you of what the sales funnel used to look like versus what it looks like now. How do you start making a marketing plan for your customer's journey through that funnel? So it's time to start taking a look at your marketing channels and map them out according to this funnel to make sure you're applying them, the channels that your audience uses, in the right places and stages of the funnel.
All right, so there's three steps to this process, and we have downloads available that you guys can get after this. We'll send an email out. So the first step is to select your marketing channels, what you have and what you want. And I'll show you what we have, a little selector to help you through that. And then once you've kind of done that, either audit of what you're doing and that wish list of what you want, then you want to map the marketing channels to your funnel to see where do those efforts line up. And a lot of this is to see if you have gaps or are you overloaded in a certain area. And what we a lot of times see is there's a natural instinct to fill in and help people with that, but sometimes we'll see a big old gap of there's no information helping a person from one step to the next. And so that's a great place to be like, okay, maybe that ends up being a priority, which leads to our next step, which is to prioritize and plan your marketing channels into action steps. So that's just trying to help you understand and give weight to it, because you can look at this and get overwhelmed very easily about these are, oh yes, I want to do everything on this list, and that doesn't really help. The only way to really make progress is to pick something and work through it, get it where you need to, and then go on to the next one. If you have a bigger team, that means you could have multiple people doing it, but really just making sure that you're making the progress you want. So for what I just outlined, we have a marketing channel selector.
All right, so this tool, like Amanda mentioned a minute ago, we'll have a download for you guys that we'll be sending out hopefully tomorrow, if not early next week after the holiday. And this selector is a tool you can use to highlight the channels you're currently using, as well as those you'd like to incorporate into your strategy. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but it gives you enough to get started and to maybe think about, if you have marketing channels that aren't listed here, where do they fall into place? So we've got some square and circle check boxes. So use that square to mark the channels you already have and the circles to note the ones you want to use.
And then once you have that list, then this also in the downloads, then you start to map it to where that person is. And this takes a little bit more of thinking through and putting yourself in the shoes of your customer. But a lot of times, per our comment that you're not encountering your customer until that last step, more of this is going to be very digital. So awareness is going to be more of, this could be advertisings, this could be signage, it could just be high level, just brand exposure. It could be sponsorships, anything like that. And then going into the decision, that could be your website. And putting that there. It also could be some of your social media. So and please note that certain channels and tactics might be in multiple stages of the funnel, and that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. This is not quite so clear cut. There's some gray areas of it. We're just trying to give you a little bit of structure to plug that in. So start to fill it in just to see where that is. And one, just to note from the decision level, a lot of that is reviews. So make sure that you have some type of way for people to, what we call social proof, that they can see that you're a viable business. A great example of that is Google's Google reviews, or if you're on Amazon, a lot of times if you have 15 million different coffee makers, we'll stick with our coffee metaphor here, you're going to start looking at, okay, I need something that's 4.5 stars or better, and looking at that. So that helps you make that decision process. So you want to make sure that something like that is available for your products as well. So fill it in the best you can. If you guys need help, we are always here. And then once you have that, we have another sheet that we're including in there, 2 sections for what you want and what you have to start prioritizing. All right, you've mapped out what your funnel looks like. All right, what do you want to really start working on? So first, fill in the marketing channel. Then you want to focus on which audiences, because you might have multiple audiences. Hint, hint, this will be our next webinar. We'll dive deeper into the audience part of this. Then you want to note what stage it's in. And then finally, you want to give a priority ranking. So you can move those around. So sometimes you list it out and you just want to change it. So list those and what you want to tackle first.
Okay, so a couple of points to consider as you're evaluating marketing channels, based on your current needs and then where you want to go next. So think about, how probable does it seem that this channel could work for you? What will it cost to acquire a customer in this channel? How many customers do you think you can expect to acquire through any given channel? And then the time frame that you need to run tests, because you do need to take some trial and error time to figure out, is this worth pursuing? Do I need to drop this and add something else? Or do I need to beef up my efforts in another area?
Absolutely. All right. That was a lot.
You probably feel like you're already drinking from a water hose. So we're going to, or not a water hose, a fire hose. So that being said, we're going to let you guys take some time to digest that information, and we are ready for questions now. So if you haven't posted them, I know we've gotten one so far in the comment box, please go ahead and drop that in. And we also have a couple of questions we received before the webinar, so I think we'll go ahead and get started on those.
Absolutely. All right, first up, comment on the difference between selling services, intangible, and goods, tangible. How is awareness different for these, or is it? Yes and no. They're both very similar, in that there's a need that they're solving. And we're seeing a little bit of the marketing efforts be similar with both of those. We don't actually usually change our tactics too much. It really depends on the audience. So it doesn't matter on the product or service. It really comes down to who are you trying to reach and how do we build those connections between each type of person. You're connecting with somebody on a emotional level to solve some type of problem. And if you're starting from that place, it doesn't matter if that solution is a service or a good. Now, however, niche wise, it could be very different. Like if you're doing some type of home service, you're going to be looking at a whole different grouping of tactics. You might be looking at something like Angie's List or House, to be able to list your profile to get some of that credibility from it. So that's where it becomes more industry, becomes more of a qualifier than necessarily good versus service. So every group is different. So maybe that's just the answer. It's all the same and it's all different, all in the same breath.
All right, next question. Is there an ideal time frame for how long to test something before deciding to keep that channel?
Yes and no. You need enough data to be able to know. If you just do it once and it's a flop, that's not necessarily a good test. You need to be able to go back in, and it's that the whole idea that it takes 7 times for somebody to realize that you're even there. That idea still applies to that channel as well. Like direct marketing is one thing that people ask all the time. It's like, don't just do one direct mail and then say, oh, it didn't work. You have to get that repetition into it. Now we can at least mix that in with digital. So that reduces the cost if you're doing something like that. So just have enough. I would say you would want at least test something at least 3 times, and you want to make sure you're improving it each time that you're doing it. Now, if you get to 2 and you're like, this was just a total flop, you can pull the plug on it if you're getting nothing from it. But as long as there's idea and improvement and some type of traction, it's always a good thing.
All right, next question. Can you give some examples of which channels fall into certain stages of the funnel? Absolutely.
Yes, we hit on this a little bit earlier. Um, yeah, advertising typically is more of awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And that could even be social media advertising. So we're not talking about, it could be boosting, but like social media ads on your different platforms, that would be your awareness level. Social media content, on the other hand, can be both interest, decision, and can even be action. So that's why it can be a little bit gray.
Mm-hmm.
So you're just, once again, mapping it against your customer's experience. What are their needs? How are they interfacing with these different marketing channels for you to connect with them? I'm trying to think of some other. Website can hit both interest and decision. So you need to have information that's explaining how your product works, as well as facts and features. So interest is where you can start listing the features you offer. And so this is something we kind of alluded to, but your awareness and your I'm sorry, did I say that wrong? Your awareness and your interest is emotional. Your decision is feature. So feature, feature, feature. If you want to list it there.
All right. Are there any channels that provide more opportunities and potential for success?
It depends on your
Yep.
clients. It depends on your audience and what's going on there. Where are they really spending their time? So it's really critical to set up ways to measure success so that you can tell if something is working or not working, for one thing, because it's really hard if all of a sudden if something stops working and you don't have a way to measure it to know what broke. So if you're overseeing marketing, you have to be your own, mechanic to figure out and problem solve it. And if you can't measure it, it's really hard to know if it's worth the energy, effort, and dollars to do it. There's still subjectivity to it. So there's a mix.
All right. I think this is our last question. I want to harvest leads, but need to be a hunter to stay afloat right now. What can I do to bring in revenue while I'm waiting on the leads to flourish?
I think every business kind of goes through this. And that's totally fine. There's a transition phase of it. You want to make sure you keep that harvest idea, because over time it will take less energy. And just like literally like farming versus hunting, farming is a very laborious job. Like, I'm not trying to undermine that by any means, but it yields a higher return than hunting. So you might put the same amount of effort into something like hunting and farming, but the result that you get from farming, that's what you're starting to think about. So you want to invest in harvesting, and it's important versus urgent. When you're having to hunt, that's, I've got to get deals in and do it. And that's not sustainable for a business. So you want to make sure you keep investing in that important harvesting work, setting up lists, doing regular, could be emails, it could be newsletters, it could be social media posts, putting gated content out there so that you're exchanging information that might be helpful to your audience for their email, so that you're building up your own list with that. So just make sure, if you have to be in that hunting mode, that you're at least making some time every week, every month to continue to build up your harvesting infrastructure so that you're actually getting the traction that you need on that. So balance, don't neglect one. They're both critical to each other. All right. With that, thank you everyone for joining us today. We'll send follow-ups with the recording, and very important,
mark your calendar for our next webinar. It is going to be on Thursday, June 25th at 11 o'clock. And like Amanda said earlier, we're going to be talking about audience profiles. So we will include a link for registration in our follow-up materials. You'll also be able to find it on our social media pages here in probably the next week. And then also, please email us if you have any topics or questions that you would like us to address. We're definitely in a very unique period of time coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic now. So we know a lot of people have had to shift priorities and change plans. So we would be more than happy we want your feedback on how we can help you and address topics that are of interest to you. So let us know.
Absolutely. We'll keep with this shorter 30-minute format, and it is 11:30 on the dot. So at that, we thank you for joining us today, and we will connect with you guys next month. Stay safe and healthy.